Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It's Monday, August 21st. Derek and Riper here with Eno Sarasa, a rare afternoon pod, right? You think of day baseball. We have morning pods usually. This is an afternoon recording, so everything looks different if you're watching us on YouTube. Actually, nothing looks different. Maybe the lighting in my office because of the windows is actually different. Eno looks exactly the same. Eno, how's everything going for you on this Monday?
Good. We're scrambling because we're putting this in between coming back from Yosemite, where we had one of those staff development days, 3-day weekends at school. So we took advantage of that. That's a little hack for anybody listening who wants to go to Yosemite. If you can go after school starts and before the winter, do it. Although what I gather is we were a little bit lucky this year. The extra rain in the spring meant that we were still able to enjoy the river, enjoy the waterfalls. Usually this close to fall, those things start tapering out because of the water. But you could use this hack also maybe in May. On the front end. So it just becomes kind of untenable where they're talking about 3 to 4 hour waits in your car to get into the park during the peak summer hours. We had nothing like that. We found parking spaces, hiked, had a great time, and we're fitting that in between coming back from that and finding out from the x-rays if my older son broke his arm.
Yeah, hopefully good news coming on that front, but might be a few weeks before he's back swinging the bat again.
Yeah, either way, even if it's just a bad sprain or a hairline or something, it doesn't look like a full sort of tibia. Not tibia is the leg, right? So, no, tibia is the arm, right?
I think the tibia and the fibula are in the leg.
Well, anyway,
forearm.
It's not like a full forearm fracture. If it is, it's something smaller, but sometimes that can be just as bad. So we're going to find out this afternoon. He's not, rolling around in pain or anything. He's got it splinted, and, you get him some Advil and he's doing okay.
Hanging in there. All right. Well, let's get things going for this episode. We've got a couple of things on the rundown that are kind of like the pitching spin-offs of an episode we did last week. Last week we were talking about hitters chasing outside the zone and maybe collectively, or at least in my case, being quick to penalize hitters who are too aggressive in their approach. We explained why that might be problematic thinking. So we're going to take a look at pitchers and look at what they do as far as getting whiffs inside and outside the strike zone. So in this case, we're talking about O-swing percentage for pitchers and zone contact percentages, just as the case was for hitters. You can look at the Baseball Info Solutions version or the StatCast version when you're looking at Fangraphs. These are the StatCast numbers that I pulled for the rundown. Use whatever set you want, but just if you hear a discrepancy, that's probably where it came from. And what I wanted to talk about first is, if you make an assumption that a pitcher who gets chases outside the zone and also does well inside the zone, so they have a high O-swing percentage and a low zone contact percentage, can you make an assumption that those are the most dominant pitchers in the game because they can beat you in the zone and they can beat you outside of the zone? They throw pitches that are so nasty, you're swinging even if it's not in the zone, right? That's a great combination of things to have. Is there any problematic thinking in wanting to put that combination of skills into a dominant sort of bucket?
I don't think so. I mean, getting whiffs in the zone is, I think, traditionally thought of as high stuff. That's. I mean, what if you're getting whiffs in the zone? Then they can't take it, and when they swing and they're missing. So I don't know that it's not. I think of that as high stuff. I think of getting chases as more command. That's, making people think it's a strike and kind of nibbling or being close in that nice shadow area around there's a definition of zones at Savant where one is shadow, which is kind of a little bit inside the zone, a little bit outside the zone, a little band around it. And the shadow zone, that's where the command artists live. And I think, whiffs in zone is where the high stuff guys live.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of kind of relating it back to the ways we usually talk about pitchers. I was surprised looking at the starters, looking for guys that do both of these things. It's not surprising to see Spencer Strider up there, 37% O swing percentage, 75.2% zone contact percentage, just phenomenal. Joe Ryan, not that far behind, has a better O swing percentage than Strider, 38.2%, slightly higher zone contact percentage at 78.8%. Joe Ryan is just the mystery wrapped in a riddle, because some of the other names that popped on the list, Yuri Perez, Shane McClanahan, Tyler Glasnow, they all made sense to me. Those were names I expected to see there. But two twins, Joe Ryan and Bailey Ober, were both surprises to me relative to my expectations for how those guys work and just how good their stuff actually is.
Yeah, well, Spencer Strider and Joe Ryan have the first and second most raw whiffs in the zone on the fastball. And so that's, I think, a big part of why they're so good. You know, just looking at this list of in-zone whiffs on the fastball, there's a lot of names that you would expect. Garrett Cole is here. Freddie Peralta is here. You know, Zach Wheeler is here. Those are all really good fastballs. There's some interesting names, though. Also, Lance Lynn is here. George Kirby is here. And we're thinking, if in-zone contact rates are, you know, such a great proxy for stuff, why is George Kirby here? It's not that he has bad stuff. It's just that most people think of him as command forward. Lance Lynn being here, he's mostly command forward. Luis Castillo is third in raw whiffs on the fastball in the zone. I guess you could think of him as a high stuff guy, but I think of him sort of as a hybrid guy. So, you know, a lot of this also has to do with, you know, how much they throw it, deception. I think Joe Ryan is here more out of deception. Spencer Strider is here out of release point plus movement plus velo, you know, what we kind of consider as stuff. So, yeah, but it's definitely some interesting names. Like, if you can get whiffs on the fastball in the zone, you're a good pitcher. The only pitchers that I'm looking at here that are at all iffy are Christian Javier with the seventh most in-zone fastball with forcing fastball whiffs. Lance Lynn, I guess, at fourth. And Joe Ryan, of course, is struggling a little bit.
Yeah, before his IL stint really hit a bumpy patch in his season, kind of going back to June or so. Ober didn't pop on that fastball list, did he? I don't think I heard his name when you were going through that group. I mean, how is he doing this? It's a higher zone contact percentage than the other players in the group, but it's the O swing, getting guys to chase outside the zone with a pretty good, better than average zone contact percentage. That's the part that surprised me. I'm surprised he does both of those things well.
Ober's 28th. He's pitched a little bit less than some other guys. Let me see if I can limit it to pitch type so I can see. Yeah, so I have pitch percentage in here, but the thing that you're doing on Savant, you have to change total pitch parameters. That, if you're doing a query on Savant, there's a box that says change total pitch parameters. That is your denominator if you're doing pitch percentage. So if I want to know how many whiffs they're getting on four seamers in the zone, I have to put pitch type and game day zones in the pitch parameters to put them at the bottom. The denominator is swings and misses divided by fastballs in the zone. When I do that, Spencer Strider has a 19% swing and miss on his fastball in the zone. Whew.
That's really good.
That is sexy.
I imagine that's reliever-esque, right? I mean, I would assume that some of your top relievers are in that range.
Yeah. Okay. So I have to up the minimum results so that I'm not just looking at these guys. Ryan Ryder has one pitch in the zone and one whiff. He's amazing. But if I change the number of results, let's see how I do here. Oh, I did it too high. There's only 5 guys. Hold on. Spencer Strider again, number 1. Here we go. I did it minimum number 25. So Kendall Graveman, 39.7. Wow. I guess what we're seeing here is that he doesn't throw the four seam that much still. And when he does, he gets whiffs. So he must be must be that people aren't looking for that. Isn't that amazing that he's number 1 in percentage of swing and miss on four seam fastballs in the zone?
Yeah, you could have given me 100 guesses and I wouldn't have even considered Kendall Graveman for the last one.
You know, around him are David Bednar and Sir Anthony Dominguez and Aroldis Chapman and Felix Bautista. You know, like, okay, duh. Number 1 starter is by percentage it might surprise you. He's on the Mariners.
Kirby?
Woo!
Brian Wu. Nice.
I'm surprised by that. Number 2 is Luis Castillo. Sandy Alcantara is up there. That's the Kendall Graveman effect, right? These pitches all still fit together. It's really hard to pull pitching apart like this. You know what I mean? It's like, why does Sandy Alcantara have such a high whiff rate on four seamers in the zone? It's because he uses the four seam for whiffs. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to find Ober here. Ober. Find me Ober. Where is Ober?
It's a 91.3 mile per hour four seamer from Bailey Ober. It's just like so unspectacular by velo, but he's tall, right? 7'4" extension. Like that's part of it.
He's pretty good. He's pretty good by percentage. It's 16%. He has the same in zone whiff rate on four seam fastballs as Zach Wheeler.
Yeah, I wouldn't have expected it just by velo alone. So there's so much more going on in Bailey Ober in this case. Again, the extension would probably be the biggest reason why that's happening.
It's all at the top of the zone. You know, one thing I do notice when I watch Bailey Ober pitch is he's really good at commanding the ball at the top of the zone. And I think you'll find that even while we're trying to sort of be like, oh, is this a proxy for stuff? We'll find that like some of these guys are on here for command. Bailey Ober, I think, is just a guy who can keep the ball from being a ball and also place the ball in that sort of top bit of the zone that is just really hard to hit.
Yeah. I mean, career 4.9% walk rate. It fits. I know command and control are not the same thing, but they're often related. You see guys with good command usually run pretty low walk rates. Ober does that. Does get into some home run trouble on occasion. We've seen that in multiple seasons now from him in the big leagues. So that could be a legitimate downside to what he does, but it's a good overall package of skills that Ober brings to the table. The relievers you mentioned before, Felix Bautista, I think, has made the case to be the first reliever off the board by just pure stuff, right? He's absolutely filthy. You can't hit him in the zone. You can't hit him outside the zone. You really can't hit Felix Bautista's stuff anywhere. If you're starting to think about relievers for the future, or you're trying to trade for the best reliever available in your league, is it safe to say Felix Bautista has become that guy? Because the results are just ridiculous.
Totally. I think so. I'm all over him. There's those knees, I guess. But you know, when you're talking about that sort of stuff, I mean, everybody's got something. I tried to do something where I focused even tighter in. So let's say, you know, isn't it sort of compelling to say that if I can get a whiff in the heart of the zone, then that's got to be stuff, right?
Yeah.
Aroldis Chapman, number 1 in whiffs on fastballs, heart of the zone. Rafael Montero, 2. It's interesting. David Bednar, Carlos Estevez, Brian Wu, Ryan Stanek, Luis Castillo, Paul Sewald, Sandy Alcantara, Joe Jimenez, Pablo Lopez, Craig Kimbrell, Tanner Scott. This is a stuff list.
Yeah,
Gavin Williams, number 1, the number 3 or 4 starting pitchers, Gavin Williams. So this, I think, is a little bit closer to just stuff.
I guess the only thought I have on that for now would be that if you are getting whiffs in the heart of the zone, you probably don't throw pitches in the heart of the zone very often. So could that be very risky or very noisy
things? Or
I just wonder if that might be a noisy thing to consider.
Or does it mean you have bad command too? I mean,
bad command.
Chapman has bad command. Bednar's not great. Stanek has bad command. Like, there are definitely some bad command guys here. Craig Kimbrell has bad command.
Well, yeah, I also think your stuff is so good that your command doesn't even matter because guys are still swinging through it.
Yeah, and then, you know, so the opposite side. So you always want to look at the opposite side of the list and be like, okay, did I do this right? You know, Jesus Luzardo has the highest contact rate on four-seam fastballs in the zone. Now, actually, I think you could make the argument that his stuff on his fastballs is not that great. It's not great shape. But then number 2 is Blake Snell. And number 3 is Kevin Gossman. And number 6 is Zach Gallen. And number
this
8
is the entire zone, not the heart of the zone right now.
This is heart.
This is the heart. Okay.
People do damage against Logan Gilbert and Hunter Brown in the heart of the zone.
See, but that's where I think my original question kind of came from. It's like, hey, look, I think you could be a good pitcher, and if you're in the heart of the zone, bad stuff's going to happen to you in most circumstances. You have to be throwing one of the absolute filthiest pitches in the league to get away with pitching there. And sometimes you just get lucky because hitter guesses wrong, just, whatever it might be, you can get away with it. But this seems like a very slippery slope skills wise. Yeah.
The number one guy in terms of number of pitches in the heart of the zone is Spencer Strider, 478 fastballs in the middle zone. That's because he only throws 2 pitches. He still does well there. Kevin Gossman, it's just really interesting. Spencer Strider's number 1 in total fastballs in the center of the zone, and he still gets 17.6% whiff rate on those pitches. Kevin Gossman is number 2 with 448 forcing fastballs in the middle of the zone, and he gets half the swing and miss that Spencer Strider does.
I wonder how much of the damage, the occasional damage that does happen to Strider, how much of it happens on those pitches?
Yes. I'm going to do some included stats and just do slugging percentage. Because if I do this and... Oh, I can't get slugging percentage too because I have swing and miss. Well, anyway, I think that, the fact that Spencer Strider, Kevin Gossman are up here, and Joe Ryan in terms of total pitches in the middle of the zone. Mackenzie Gore is up here. Ryan Nelson is up here. Michael Kopech. Christian Javier is here. It's it's gonna sound dumb, but you do want to avoid the middle of the zone.
Yes, I was not questioning that at any point during the process of building out this episode. I didn't have the absolute galaxy brain moment where I said maybe it's okay to be in the middle of the zone. Like, no, it's not. You don't want to be in there.
But it's worse.
It's worse for some guys than it is for others.
Yeah, it's worse for Zach Gallen, than it is for Garrett Cole and Spencer Strider. So,
but that's stuff. That's a difference in stuff. And I think the other core group of players that got the wheels spinning for me today, when you look at the leaderboard, just the overall WAR leaderboard for starting pitchers for this year, Gallen is number 2 over at Fangraphs. Sonny Gray, Pablo Lopez are 5 and 6. Kirby is 7th.
In what?
In WAR. Zach Eflin is 9th. This is a different group of pitchers that it's popping this year. I realize WAR is not necessarily fantasy value, but it's just these are mostly guys, almost entirely guys that are going to go earlier in drafts next year than they did this year, or they're much more expensive to trade for in a late season trade if you're trying to get pitching because they've been so good so far this year. And they all kind of fall into this group where they're good at getting chases, but they do get hit a lot more when they're in the zone. So kind of balancing this out, if you have excellent command, which I think would be reflected by either low walk rate or low home run rate or both, and or a lot of grounders, if you have some other related metrics that kind of connect to this, are you okay buying into sustained growth or at least maintaining this level in the future for this group of guys that will go, again, much, much earlier in drafts? Justin Steele's up there too in WAR this year. He's been a tricky pitcher for us all year. It goes back to the second half of last season. Does this actually work, getting those chases outside the zone, but being more hittable than you'd expect inside the zone?
I mean, my research from stuff and location suggests that, those guys are an iffier bet. But I did, for the purposes of this podcast, look back at an old piece from Bill Petty. Now, this was done in 2012. It's possible things have changed a little bit since then. But I was surprised to find that O contact and O swing have the same year-to-year stickiness, or not exactly the same, or just below K percentage. So K percentage has a 0.82 correlation year to year for pitchers. And that's why we focus on it. It's one of the best. If you eliminate pitch type metrics like, curveball percentage or whatever, the only thing better than K percentage is ground ball percentage. So those two things are super highly correlated year to year. Now, right below K percentage is swing strike rate. And that's why I looked this up, because I wanted to be like, hey, is swing strike rate just capturing all that we're talking about here and doing it better and stickier year to year and becomes reliable faster and is therefore just a superior metric? Let's put that aside, because I'm surprised to find that swing strike rate 0.81, O swing 0.79, and O contact 0.77. So it looks like the ability to get batters to chase is a pretty sticky year-to-year ability. And so if that's the case, then it's the type of pitchers that do get those chases, whether it's tunneling or command, they seem like maybe they're a better bet than I expected.
Yeah, this is it's a tricky group. I mean, Aaron Nola's in here, Joe Musgrove's in here, Garrett Whitlock also in there as a smaller inning sample sort of guy with that high O swing and high zone contact. Logan Webb, that makes sense to me as the prototype, because Logan Webb gets a ton of ground balls. So if you're a ground ball pitcher, you're going to have higher zone contact percentage. That's just part of how you work. And I started thinking about this over the weekend. A lot of what happens in player development is about making your stuff better, missing bats, trying to strike guys out. That's the best outcome. No contact, nothing bad happens, right? But it might not be the best thing for injury, as we've talked about on this show for years, because your pitch count can go up higher and you're not as efficient as you could be. Like maybe some of the
pitches that you throw for whiffs might also be higher stress on your elbow. Like literally.
Right. So there could be an approach to pitching that is this. People are going to say this is what it was like in the 70s and 80s. Maybe. I mean, maybe some of the old stuff with the new stuff is actually the right way to go, where you make pitchers more efficient. You find ways to say, I'm in the zone, or even these group of guys that people might be skeptical of for a variety of different reasons. Maybe this is actually a more sustainable approach in general to pitching, because it's less about racking up whiffs and more about being efficient with your pitches, getting through your start, getting through 6 innings without throwing 110 pitches, just getting it done, right? Because I like this group overall, and yet other than like Aaron Nola's peak season, I'm not sure I look at any of those guys and say definitely SP1 stuff for these guys, even though they're getting SP1 type results.
Yeah, I mean, I feel better about the group that combines great Z contact with great chase rates.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's always been like, that's in my head. That's the ideal. But
Nola and Eflin are similar. They're right next to each other. When I just look at qualified starters and I do it by O swing percentage, Nola and Eflin are right next to each other, and they're both guys that also have 86, 87, 88% zone contact. So, and then, but then there's Merrill Kelly right there with them. And do I want to bet on the Merrill Kelly profile year in and year out?
We talked about him maybe 2 months ago, and it's a really deep mix of pitches, which is something you generally like. Mm-hmm. It's improvement pretty late in his career, so that's a little surprising. But yeah, 33.1% O swing percentage, that's pretty good. 83.1% for the zone contact percentage, not that bad. That's more like the first group than the second group.
Yeah, I guess so. Okay, I'm going to go high zone contact. So I'm doing it by zone contact. Who are the pitchers I like here? I don't like Kyle Freeland. I don't like Jordan Lyles. I don't like Brady Singer. I don't like Patrick Corbin. I skipped a name already. Okay, so now we got Logan Webb is 4th, Alex Cobb is 6th, Taijuan Walker is 7th. They don't necessarily get a lot of chases other than Logan Webb. So there's still a way to be an okay pitcher in the zone. It is to be a ground ball pitcher.
Right. And that's not a big surprise, right? If you're
going where Bryce Elder is, look at that.
there's got to be some threshold where if you're going to get hit in the zone this much, you have to get a certain number of ground balls or a certain ground ball rate for it to all work out.
Right. And is Bryce Elder's 52% there? Because Logan Webb's at 61% ground balls. You know,
Right. He's 61.
Marcus Stroman is 58.
Fromber usually runs pretty high. I think when we talked about Fromber last, his ground ball rate, it was more normal than 53.5%. That's very normal, but his typical marks are in the 60s. Like he was 66.5% last year for the ground ball rate, over 200 innings. So that to me, like Fromber and Logan Webb are very similar. Different handedness, but similar in that they can actually get a decent number of strikeouts and really do a good job of limiting damage and contact with their approaches and their pitch mix.
Yeah, but what is Justin Steele? Justin Steele has an 89% zone contact and a 35.8% chase rate. According, this is we're using slightly different numbers. That's my fault. But Justin Steele is a high chase, high contact guy with an okay ground ball rate. Do you believe in Justin Steele?
I'm starting to. I think the general sort of rule I have is that you don't have to do both of these things well. You just have to do at least one of them well. And then how your stuff interacts and your command, the other factors are the things that we need to be looking at before we make a decision on a pitcher. So I'm not willing to dismiss a pitcher because of failure in one of these areas. Steele is
how about somebody who fails in most of these areas? Kyle Bradish.
Oh, is he bad in all of them?
He's average at chase. He's the 19th worst zone contact among qualified pitchers, and he has a 48% ground ball rate.
That's a rough combination. I mean, we had a question about Bradish too while I'm thinking through my answer. Bradish's fastball stuff plus has been better over the past month. And the question was basically like, how? How does that happen in season? Does it mean anything? The 115 fastball stuff plus over the last month. Is that a thing that you can reasonably look at and say there's some adjustments and this is real and this is sustainable? Or is it just sort of a normal fluctuation you could have? Because I think in the past, you mentioned Bradish has this kind of an average or worse fastball. And part of what makes him effective is that he doesn't throw it that often.
Yeah, I mean, there's an actual pretty simple answer here. Is he's throwing the fastball harder than he has for most of the season?
That works.
So especially if you break it by month, it's pretty obvious to see. He went from 94.3 in the first month of the season to 94.8 now. By game, there's a little bit of up and down with the pitch, but it's generally getting harder. And it's generally getting more horizontal movement. So at the beginning of the season, it was kind of, we talked about this a fair amount where we talked about like he hadn't found his horizontal movement on that fastball. And he had basically a 0 horizontal movement. And he's added 2.5 inches of horizontal movement since then. So it's still a little inconsistent movement wise, but it's inconsistent in the better direction, like more and more movement. It's possible he hasn't found the ideal movement for this pitch yet. So I guess it's possible that he could stick around at 110 if he kind of solidifies the gains he's made with his pitch.
Yeah, I'd like to see improvement in one of these areas before being excited about Bradish at a much increased price for next year. So he's probably, for now, an early avoid if we're looking ahead to next season, even though it's been a great season for him so far. And what he's doing is obviously very valuable to the Orioles to this point. What about this group? The low O-swing percentage, but the low zone contact percentage group. Shohei Ohtani, 25.8% O-swing percentage, very low. 82% zone contact rate. It's very good. Blake Snell's in this group too. Michael Kopech kind of fits this same sort of description. Nestor Cortez, not all the same by stuff, but Ohtani and Snell I almost wonder if guys don't chase against them because they're so filthy. They're just looking for something. They're looking for something closer to the heart of the zone. They're not looking for something on the edges of the zone. And Snell's reputation as a guy that issues a lot of walks would lead you as a hitter to go up to the plate thinking, if it's close, I'm not swinging, right? I'm letting stuff that's on the edges go. And
I think,
maybe
it's
the
like
approach shapes it.
with the game plan. I mean,
Yeah.
the game plan, Shohei Ohtani, all the things are great about him, except maybe his command. It's not his greatest his greatest feature. And Blake Snell, it's really obvious that command is not his best feature. And Dylan Cease is on this low zone contact, middling or bad chase rate. He's on this list. Kodai Senga is on this list. So there are definitely some pitchers here that have poor command. And Yusei Kikuchi is on this list. They have poor command, and what the game plan is. What the hitters are trying to do is make him throw you a strike. And when these pitchers do it because they have good enough stuff, they can get whiffs. But I think it's a little bit about how poor their command is and what the game plan is against them.
Yeah, I figured that was likely part of how some of these numbers take shape. You have a reputation, it's in the game plan. Teams go ahead and make some adjustments. I wondered what would happen if you're bad at both of these things. You don't get swings and misses outside the zone, and you hit a lot in the zone. Those are your worst pitchers generally. But a few names that actually popped that were bad in both. The worst in both is Adam Wainwright at this stage of his career. 20.3% O-swing percentage, 92.7% zone contact percentage. It just doesn't work. 1 year too many probably is the best explanation for that. But seeing younger guys like Matt Manning on that part of the leaderboard
Brady
is a concern.
Singer, once again, here. Jake Irvin.
Yeah, Jake Irvin. Matthew Liberatore, big hit for Lodom in its early days. Matthew Liberatore. Mitch Keller was still bad in both, even this year, which was a little surprising to me. I would have figured something had changed. I would have thought actually the zone contact percentage was better for Mitch Keller, because I've watched him a few times this year, and the stuff has looked pretty good. But a 24.6% O-swing percentage and an 86% zone contact percentage for Keller, which is just baffling.
I think the first number is poor command. This is something we knew about Mitch Keller, right? We knew he had poor command. The second number surprises me because I've sorted it in my head as someone who has good stuff and poor command. And
it's better. It's better than it was. 85.6% is the best zone contact percentage of Mitch Keller's career.
Yeah. And and what's also surprising to me is that as someone who I think of as high stuff and low command, he's found this relative success by throwing many more types of pitches.
Mm-hmm.
And you would have thought if he's high stuff, then isn't he going to be more like Spencer Strider, where he just throws a ton of his best pitches at the middle of the zone and, doesn't get chases, but gets whiffs. But he's not that guy either. So this is the best version of Keller, and I like him. And I thought this could happen, but I'm not sure there's another level.
That's probably fine if there's not. I guess the question is, you look at his last 14 starts now, kind of cut his season in half, go back to the start of June. It's a 5.11 ERA since then. Home run rate's up a little bit, 1.3 homers per 9, over 3 walks per 9. The underlying skills are not that bad. He should have a better result than this. This doesn't add up. Like it still seems like through all of it, and this includes a stretch for the first couple months where we had conversations. Mitch Keller figured it out. It's all happening. This is the guy. This is the guy we wanted to begin his season. His first 12 starts, 11 Ks per 9. It was a 93-17 strikeout to walk in 74 2/3 innings, 3.25 ERA. It was deserved, right? He was keeping the ball in the park. Everything was working. So the thing people are going to wonder about is, can he take that and the way he got there? Can he do something like that over a full season? Or is this the adjustment phase where he had a new game plan and the league adjusted to it, and the second half results are closer to his new baseline now that the league has seen it for a little while? I don't have the answer today, but I think that's what people are going to start thinking about as they try and figure out what to do with him going into next season.
if I am going to convince myself he has another level, I'm going to convince myself that some of the new pitches he's added over the course of the last 2 years just need more time, and that he will be able to command them a little bit better going forward. So in the last year, he's added the sweeper, the cutter, and the sinker. That's 3 pitch types that do improve the breadth of his arsenal. And honestly, the sweeper is his best pitch, and the cutter is maybe his second best pitch. So the fact that he's added these in the last few years might give you a little bit of hope. I'm looking at his stuff plus since June 1, and he still scores very highly on the slider. Cutters above 100, the fastballs at 99, stuff plus, curveballs 92, sinkers 90. Like, this is totally an arsenal that can work. It's just, I think he's lacking a little bit in just like kind of feel stuff, like command,
consistency, execution, command, right? Yeah. It's all kind of lumped together, but I could see myself ending up with more Mitch Keller than I would have thought, just because there was improvement, and the final results still were disappointing in the face of how good the start of his season was. That could be a player I end up going after if he's and fourth or fifth starting pitcher.
Bias could also set people next year to be like, man, he really stunk at the end of the season, and they might just sort of remember that part,
I get the sense that Mitch Keller's name will be on a factor fluke panel at First Pitch Arizona, right? Like, he's putting together the resume that will almost certainly make him part of those conversations, which, hey, by the way, I'll be there in Arizona this year, which is nice to get back. I even got the shirt on from the last time I went, the 2019 edition. It's got a cactus on it. You can't really see it. It's a little ambiguous, like what was on the shirt. It's a cactus. But yeah, you should check it out. BaseballHQ.com for all the details. The most fun you can have after baseball season ends. Spoiler alert, baseball season never really ends. It doesn't around here anyway.
But I do think, back to sort of an original thing that we were talking about with, O swing and zone swing and how good they are. Some of the stuff just doesn't. So if you're talking about swinging strike rate, there's a concept of reliability that, once it passes a threshold for reliability, you can believe that stat more, and the better stats kind of, get close to, 100% reliability. And swing strike rate becomes pretty meaningful. There's more signal than noise. It's, something you would look at pretty quickly. We're talking about 500 pitches. Swing strike rate tells you something. And that's quicker than called strike rate. So even though I love CSW, if you look at swing strike rate before you look at full called strike plus swing strike rates will become meaningful faster. So you can get a lot out of swing strike rates early in the season. So that's good. And swing strike rate, we've just told you, is one of the most powerful in terms of staying sticky season to season. When you look at pitches outside the zone, so you want to look at swing rates outside the zone, it takes 1,000 pitches to become stable, and then it doesn't really give you more information past that. It's one of those curves where it gets to stability at 1,000 pitches, and then you get a little bit more information between 1,000 and 1,600, but you don't really get that much more information. So it's like kind of this weird thing where you kind of have to wait around a fair amount. Like 1,000 pitches in, you're talking about 10 starts. So after 10 starts, are you going to look at the pitcher's O swing rate? You know what I mean? Especially if it's not going to give you much more information. It's not going to get better. That O swing rate is not going to give you more information going forward. So you kind of have to wait around a decent amount of time. And then, yes, season to season had surprising amount of stickiness, but it has less stickiness than swing strike rate. So I'm making my case that I think swing strike rate is just, a better stat than these.
Yeah, maybe, and maybe that's part of this too, is that you're saying you don't have to go all the way down to this level. We have it. It's helpful if you want to do the deeper dive, but it's not necessarily the thing that has to go on your dashboard as you're trying to build your rankings and trying to figure out. it may not matter where you get whiffs as long as you can get them, right? If you
Yeah,
consistently get a high
that's
number
the
of
thing,
whiffs,
right? Like swing
it's
strike rate
part of your
captures.
approach.
Yeah, swing strike rate captures the guys that get chases on switches outside the zone and get chases inside, and get swings and misses inside zone. So like, what are you gonna get from like teasing those things apart? You have to wait longer, Maybe when you're trying to identify, maybe what we're doing here is maybe helping identify some sleepers that next year could they improve one side of that, throw fewer pitches inside the zone, if they're bad at contact inside the zone, or you know what I mean, like.
It's a little more process related. I'd be tempted after like 10 starts to say, oh, the O swing percentage is down compared to the previous career norms. Okay, is something with a particular pitch or a location strategy not working the same way? And is that fixable? If it's fixable, it's a buy low, it's a player I'm trading for, it's a player I'm picking up. If we don't think it's fixable, then it's not a player that I'm going to go after and try and add to my roster.
Yeah, I mean, there's just the real question of if command is fixable. I tend to, gravitate towards some of these guys. Shintaro Fujinami as a reliever has been interesting. He's been okay. There's been some hiccups. I was thinking about somebody else that just Kyle Harrison.
Oh, yeah.
91 location plus on the fastball in the minor leagues. 16% walk rate. He's now a major leaguer. The stuff, I think, the stuff plus whatever, it's been on the leaderboard for the minor leagues, since we've been updating that. So he's obviously up there, but who is the guy we were disagreeing about? Joe Boyle. Is he Joe Boyle? Is he, who is he on these lists? He's obviously going to be a guy that does not get a lot of chase swings, right? Because they're going to step in the box and be like, I know about you. You got to throw me a strike.
The Kyle Harrison usage should be pretty interesting too. A lot of his appearances are shorter, right? It fits into that follower bulk arm sort of build that the Giants like to use.
How they're going to use him.
He has one outing this season. In every game I believe he's pitched has been a start this year. One where he's gone 5 innings. He's got 4 where he's gone between 4 or less than 5, and everything else under 4.
Even going into this one, it's 4 in the last start, but 3.1, 2, 2, 3.0, 3.2, 2.1. You have to go back to June 15th to get to a 5. So I don't know if they're managing innings or is preparing him for this role.
He just turned 22, and if you look at the past workloads and think about how they might be working with that, I think last season was the career high. That was a 113 between high A and double A. And he's at 67 2/3. So they can let him just go as much as he is able to go the rest of the season.
And my understanding of how the Giants minor league system works is that, they're more conservative, lower in the minors. When you're talking about 16, 17-year-olds, they're just, trying to produce good major leaguers, trying to develop them to the best of their abilities. And then way more aggressive with strategy in the high minors. And so what you've seen is a bunch of relievers come out of the high minors throwing like 60% sliders, where they're like, hey, we're not even sure you're a major leaguer. So your slider's your best pitch. Let's, see what happens when you throw them 60% of the time, and Maurice Jovera came up and did that. And I guess they didn't think he was good enough and they dropped him, but the Red Sox picked him up. What I see out of this is they're not sure Kyle Harrison is a top of the rotation guy, and they're preparing him for life on the actual San Francisco Giants, which means you might get 3 innings.
Yep. This is Sean Manaea. He is your locker buddy. He is going to tell you all about life as a member of the San Francisco Giants and how it's different than being on other pitching staffs.
Yeah, very different pitchers, very different people, I think, too, but in the same boat, perhaps.
Could be a fun sitcom. Harrison and Manaea, just hanging out with those two guys. We had a couple other questions that rolled in. We'll save a couple for Wednesday, but there was one about Brady Singer. You mentioned him in passing a little earlier. Rob wanted to know Singer has been really good for the last month, including a big uptick in K rate. He was really bad early in the year, so it's been a huge turnaround. Is there anything in the pitch mix or otherwise that explains how Brady Singer has been more effective here over the last 2 months or so?
All right, so we're talking since the beginning of July.
Yeah, if you go last 60 days, that's 3.45 ERA, 112 whip, 52 Ks against 14 walks, just 5 homers allowed in those 62 and 2/3. I love that this conversation follows one of his worst starts of the entire season. He went 3 2/3 over the weekend against the Cubs, but nevertheless, he has been much better.
I don't know that I believe in him because, first of all, on every time we sorted the list, he was at the bottom. You know, that's why you kept hearing his name in this episode, right?
Right.
He was, in both poor buckets, I think, for chase and in zone contact. And then when I switch over to the Stuff Plus tab, even since July 1st in this good stretch, 83 Stuff Plus on the sinker, 84 on the slider, 53 on the changeup. Like decent amount of command. I think maybe he had a stretch where he's commanding the ball well, but in terms of, do I believe or not? I'm going to say I heartily do not agree that he's a good bet going forward next year or the rest of the season. He's somebody that I just put firmly in the bucket of I like Cole Raggins better. I think there's more upside for Cole Raggins to be a front of the rotation type pitcher. Singer to me is in that bucket of he pitches in Kansas City. If he's got the White Sox and the Guardians at home this week, I'm into it.
Yeah, there's some cases in deeper leagues where you throw him out there without really worrying about recent form. I think what's tricky is that this recent stretch looked very similar to what he did last year, over 153 in the third inning. So it was the best season that I didn't even notice until about September because I had him nowhere. 3.23 ERA, 114 whip a year ago. You're right in that the skills this year, especially, it's a sub 20% K rate for the season, even with the recent improvement. The walk rate's not as good as it was last year. It's not a case where the swinging strike rate's way up and the K rate's still just lagging behind. It's basically the same swinging strike rate we've always seen from Brady Singer. It's sinker slider, so I think there's that. He kind of reminds me of the way I looked at Kyle Gibson early in his career. Kyle Gibson came up as a prospect in the Twins system, had this one window of success that made everyone think that there was that level that he could get back to all the time. And year over year over year, he underperformed, even though there were stretches where you could use him. I think that's basically what Brady Singer is right now.
The one thing I would say in Gibson's defense is a lot more pitches.
I don't remember if he had that many pitches at the beginning of his career, though, or if that's something that's changed with him over time.
He kept every year kept adding a pitch to stave off all the time.
Yeah, it was 3 pitches. It was fastball, slider, changeup at the beginning of his career.
Yeah, now he's like, I've got 3 different cutters.
Tinkering and tinkering and tinkering some more. So that's kind of where I'm at with him. Another player that was part of that email, this was from Rob, Luis Severino. He's been horrible all season. Is there anything in the underlying numbers that explains the Severino collapse?
It's not obvious to me. You look at things like velo and movement, and it's pretty obvious he's not all the way back to where he was by a lot of those. I'm going to do, regular season, and I'm going to talk about year to year, so I can just look at this. Four-seam velo this year, 96.67. That's his best since 2018. So, but it's what? It's like his third best or fourth best four-seam velo. So that's not quite it. The one thing that I did notice, and I think about this with James Paxton too, is that his slider velo at 85.3 is the second worst of his career. And when he was really at his best, Luis Severino had that nasty gyro hard 89-mile-an-hour slider. And if he's throwing it 85, that means that some of those are 84 and 83, right? If you think about just the distribution of pitches. So we know that around 85 and 86, there's a threshold where, sliders get a lot better if you can throw it harder than that. So if he's averaging 85, that means he's throwing, sliders that are 84 and 83 that don't have a lot of movement because they're kind of gyro-ish, kind of like 0-0 zoops, and like, if he's doing that, then and he's throwing them 84, 83, I would venture to guess that that's maybe the main place that he's lacking. Will he get it back? I just, when I talked to James Paxton, he said, I don't know why my fastball velo is back, but my slider velo is not. He said, I wonder that, they have this tendon in your wrist that you don't really use. And now that when they do Tommy Johns now, they take this like tendon that you quote unquote don't really use and use that for your new tendon in your arm. And he's like, what if that was like helping me throw the slider faster? Like, what if there is actually some use to that thing? So, but I think about that with how much I want to trust James Paxton and why Luis Severino has fallen off so much, because breaking ball velo is as important as fastball velo. And I think a lot of times we look at the fastball and be like, he's 97. What's the problem here? But he's 85 on the fastball. And I think that's probably the biggest source of drop for him.
Yeah, I was thinking about it in the context of Noah Syndergaard too. I mean, velocity down just everywhere across the board for Syndergaard ever since he came back from his injuries. And it's not that he doesn't throw 97 with his fastball anymore. It's that his slider is slower and his curveball. It's the secondaries. The velo loss on the secondaries is probably burying him more than only losing the velo on the fastball would have. If he still, like, let's just say he had the same velo on his secondaries and was throwing 92 with his fastball, he would just throw the secondaries more and that would work. But the secondaries aren't as good at this velo as they were at the old velo. So nothing works for him anymore.
That said, the Stuff Plus story under the hood says 98 Stuff Plus fastball, 120 Stuff Plus slider, 105 Stuff Plus cutter. These numbers aren't as good as they were before, but he also isn't a guy that has awful command. So, like, I have a place in my heart for Luis Severino. He's out there for free in AL labor right now. There's like a standing offer that somebody can take him off his hands. I don't know if I have the intestinal fortitude in labor where I have to put him in my lineup to pick him up. But, he obviously has 12-team upside. So if you're in a 12-team and you're out of it and you just have a roster slot that's going to some boring reliever that you're not going to keep, over the offseason, why not just pick up Severino and leave him on your bench? Or if you want to lose games, you're in tankathon, like, throw Severino. But I'm not sure that the career is over. You know what I mean? Like, I may have some shares of Luis Severino, especially if, what if he signs with the Pirates next year? There seems to be like a highway from New York to Pittsburgh. And
I think there literally is.
Pirates next year, like, he has a nice home park. What if he comes in the spring, he's throwing 86, 87 on the slider again? Like, might be into it.
Yeah, I think there is a literal highway between those two places. So ways to get from here to there, more than just airplanes in this case. But
it's the Ivan Nova highway.
Yes. Severino home against the Nats this week. Sure, why not? Next week's going to be a two-step at the Tigers, at the Astros. If you're playing catch-up, or even if you're not currently in the money and bulk is the only way you're going to get there, that's the dart throw. Like, that's one of the guys you say, who else are they going to throw out there?
Unfortunately, they're throwing him like 3 and 4 and 2 innings per start, so you might not even get that much bulk out of 2 starts.
But if he pitches well, they'll leave him in because he's a pending free agent, and they're just trying to get through the end of the season now. It's just it's survival mode for the Yankees. We are going to go on our way out the door. You can get a subscription to The Athletic for $2 a month for the first year at theathletic.com/rates and barrels. You can find us on Twitter at Enoceris and at Derek Van Riper. The pod is at Rates and Barrels. If we set up other accounts for the pod, I will relay them here. That's going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. We are back with you on Tuesday.
Thanks for listening.